스마트 시티
We are here at the 2021 World Smart City Expo, where we can gain a glimpse of the future and present status of smart city. Welcome to the tech conference, which is being held on the third day of the WSCE. I will lead you through this event. My name is Cho Woo-jung. At the tech conference, we'll be talking about the core technologies that are at the foundation of smart cities. And we have invited experts from the businesses, from home and abroad, that are at the forefront of innovation. They are joining us online and offline, and they will be providing insightful views. If you are interested in the future of cities and the future of the humanity, please join us at the tech conference. We will be hosting the conference in two sessions. In the first session, we'll be talking about the innovation and transformation of smart cities in the era of carbon neutrality. And then there will be a smart city data live session. So let us take a look at a video to learn about the theme of the first session, 2021 World Smart City Expo Tech Conference. Let us begin.
탄소 중립은 기술 혁신과
Carbon neutrality has to be supported by technology innovation and industrial revolution, and already many companies are voluntarily taking the initiative.
네, 자 이제
Carbon neutrality has become one of the greatest challenges of our times. Now, amidst this trend, how can smart cities respond? At the Smart City Tech Conference, we'll be talking about the innovation transformation of smart cities in the era of carbon neutrality. Let me introduce the moderator of our session. He is the chairman of the National Smart City Committee. He is also the senior vice president of ISCA, Institute of Smart City and Architecture. He's Professor Kim Do-yeon of Sungkyunkwan University. Thank you very much for the introduction. So today we will be talking about carbon neutrality, which might be a bit difficult of a concept to understand. But as you know, we are threatened by climate change, and that is one of the biggest challenges of our time. So in order to resolve the issue of climate change, we are trying to reduce the emissions of CO2. Up till we have been enjoying convenient and abundant lives utilizing the fossil fuels which have emitted CO2. But now we have to meet the goal of carbon neutrality, and for that we have to endure a bit of inconvenience, and we have to look back at our daily lives and our lifestyles. For our next generation, what shall we have to do? We first have to focus on carbon neutrality. And I do believe that smart city technology can help us meet that goal while reducing the inconveniences that we may have to endure. So carbon neutrality, going carbon neutral, will be something that we will talk about today with the experts joining us. And I do hope that we will gain insight on how we can more effectively meet this goal. Yes, thank you very much. We just heard from Professor Kim Do-yeon, who will serve as the moderator of the first session. Thank you. Professor, today we have invited some very special guests, right? Yes. Today we have not simply invited experts. They're not just simple experts, but actually they are the ones who are out in the field, who are dealing with the technologies themselves. They are the gurus of the core technologies. So let me first introduce the experts. Yes. First of all, he is an expert of zero energy city development. He is Dr. Choi Hyung-jin of the GSENC Institute. Yes, thank you very much. I am from the GSENC Institute. My name is Choi Hyung-jin. I'm not sure if I'm worthy of being called an expert, but currently I am working on energy design for the zero energy development. So I am in charge of the trading, the design, and the operation of zero energy systems. Thank you very much. He is a smart engineer. He's a research engineer at GSENC. Yes, the next expert is working in many countries around the world. He is indeed an expert of clean energy. General Manager Ki Kyung-hyun of Korea East West Power. Yes, good morning. As introduced, my name is Ki Kyung-hyun, and I work at Korea East West Power, which is responsible for 10% of the power generation in Korea. I am working at the Overseas Renewable Energy Division, and I am working on renewable projects in countries such as Australia, Chile, Indonesia, and Kenya. Yes, so we have a great lineup today, and I do believe that we will be able to gain insight from them. Why don't we go into the discussion in full-fledged? Today at this tech conference, we're talking about the innovation and transformation of smart cities in an era of carbon neutrality. And so first, I think we have to think about what actually carbon neutral means. We have to define this first. What do you think carbon neutral means? Well, in the past, we only focused on reducing the emission of CO2, but just because we reduce the emissions does not mean that we can stop or prevent climate change. So when we talk about carbon neutrality, I think that it means absorbing CO2 through various measures and also at the same time reduce the CO2 emissions. So doing the math plus and minus, we can make carbon emissions zero. So you're saying that in the end, we want zero carbon, zero CO2, right? Yes. Can you add on to that? Yes, well, carbon neutrality, I think that this is about pursuing the carbon neutrality through various measures, including the government policies, and we have a goal of meeting the carbon neutral goal by 2050. Yes, thank you very much. What about you, Dr. Cheong-jin? Yes, well, for carbon neutrality, I think that the role of the smart cities is very important. Smart cities, well, it can help with issues such as the lack of energy or the aging of cities. I think that is the only alternative that we can turn to. In particular, I think that by providing energy, utilizing new infrastructure development, we will be able to contribute to carbon neutrality. Okay, so cities are at the center of CO2 emissions, but you're saying that we can find a solution in these cities as well, right? So I think that we have to look into what kind of solutions we can utilize. So Professor Kim, what do you think is a starting point of dealing with these issues? Well, I think that first of all, we have to think about that very issue. When we try to go carbon neutral, what do you think is most important? Who do you think should be at the center of this? What do you think, Mr. Cho? Well, I'm not really sure I know the exact definition of carbon neutrality, but I think it's tied with the practice of preventing the use of disposable goods. I think that the citizens, they can be at the forefront of this movement, right? Yes, that is correct. The citizens play a very important role. So we, each and every one of us, have to contribute to reducing the emissions of CO2. But in order for the citizens to participate, I think that There are the actors who have to be involved in an active manner. What do you think? Yes, well, I think first of all, the businesses have to play a role because the businesses actually obtain economic benefits from the society. So they have a responsibility to improve the quality of life of our society and also improve the environment. Of course, the businesses for this have been involved in the R&D of smart cities, for example, and they have been making many investments. Yes, I do agree. I think that what is most important, or the most important role to be played for carbon neutrality in cities, is the role that can be taken on by businesses. And I do believe that, in particular, in the case of Korea, we have an industry structure where the manufacturing sector holds a great proportion. So I believe that in terms of energy consumption, the industry accounts for 95% among all of the businesses. So I think that the businesses have to play a role. Okay, so are you saying that the businesses are the culprits of this issue? I thought that the citizens have to take the lead, but what you're saying is that the businesses have to take the lead. What do you think, Dr. Kim? Yes, well, I think that the lives of the people, well, they are deeply dependent on the products and services that are produced by industries and the businesses. And so before the citizens, I think that the businesses have to step up and participate in going carbon neutral. So I do think that it is the businesses that have to play a major role first. I think that one of the indicators that helps us identify the CO2 emissions is energy usage. According to the Korea Statistical Office, the households account for 14.5% of power usage in Korea, but actually the greatest proportion of energy use comes from the industry sector, 48.8%, and then the service sector accounts for 28%. In other words, most of the use of power based on fossil fuel are used by businesses in their activities for production. So I do believe that the role of the businesses is most important. Yes, you are emphasizing the role of businesses, and I think that there is indeed a reason for that. So recently, there are a lot of businesses that are focusing on ESG management for going carbon neutral. There has been an increase in these businesses. Yes, that is true. ESG is a way for businesses to respond to the issue of climate change. And I understand that in various business sectors, many companies are leading the way in ESG management and have adopted ESG management in their business model. Yes, one of the most representative, I think, would be RE100 initiative. This might be a new concept for some people, but actually this is a group of businesses that are gathered together to make their energy resources 100% coming from renewable energy sources by 2050. And so we have invited Sam Kimmins, who is the head of Global RE100 initiative, to our tech conference. He sent a video message, and he will talk about the vision and the role of RE100. Let's take a look.
Hello, my name's Sam Kimmins. I'm the head of RE100 with the Climate Group. It's an honour to be speaking today about the role of renewables in smart cities here at the World Smart Cities Expo, and I'd like to thank the ministries for their kind invitation. First, a little bit about RE100. RE100 is an initiative established by the Climate Group in partnership with CDP, and we work with over 320 of the world's most influential companies committed to sourcing 100% renewable electricity. Together, RE100 companies' combined electricity demand is around 330 terawatt hours per year. That's bigger than the UK and nearly 2/3 of the electricity demand of South Korea, all committed to 100% clean power. Among our members are global giants such as Apple and Google, and we recently welcomed 10 leading Korean companies, including 6 companies from the SK Group, plus LG Energy Solution, K-Water, and Amore Pacific. So welcome to those Korean companies. If infrastructure is the foundation of smart cities, then renewable energy is its lifeblood. We know from the latest IPCC report that for us to thrive in the latter part of the 21st century, our businesses, our homes and our transport need to be powered using 100% carbon-free energy by 2050. According to the IEA, this requires annual additions of solar PV and wind to reach 1,000 gigawatts per year by 2030. This is 4 times the global record set in 2020. For solar PV, this is equivalent to us installing the equivalent of the world's current largest solar park roughly every day somewhere in the world. So a really big challenge, but what does this mean in practice, and what is the role of business? Well, firstly, I'd like to address a misconception. When people think of renewables in cities, they often think of solar cladding, rooftop turbines, rooftop solar. Now, while these will play an important part, they by no means will be able to match the demand requirements of the cities of today, not to mention the cities of the future. The cities of the future will be powered by a network of utility-scale solar farms, offshore wind farms and other technologies at utility scale, all interconnected through well-linked international grids. This is not small-scale building-by-building ventures. So that's important to bear in mind. And what's the role of business in this? Well, business accounts for around a half of total global electricity demand. And RE100 companies are showing how business is investing heavily in the renewable energy transition to make sure that their electricity consumption is renewable. Why are they doing this? Well, with the cost of solar PV dropping by around 85% since 2010 and wind dropping by around 50% over the same period, RE100 companies are finding that renewables make business sense as well as environmental sense, and they are investing at scale. For example, Taiwan's TSMC recently agreed to buy the output of what was at the time the world's largest wind farm. And across the globe, you're seeing huge investments by RE100 companies. IKEA famously owns more wind turbines than they do stores. City authorities are also acting. For example, the City of London Corporation, also an RE100 member, has invested in a solar power purchase agreement to meet all of their electricity needs using renewable electricity. The potential investment from RE100 members to meet their goals would be over $100 billion by 2030. However, most of this corporate investment in renewables is happening in Europe and the US. Korea and much of Asia Pacific is falling behind and missing out. And government action is needed to unlock this corporate investment at the scale we need to see to ensure that our future cities are renewable, clean and competitive. Thankfully, the Korean government is acting fast to open markets to corporate investment, introducing new RE100 measures that enable companies to buy renewables directly from wind and solar farm developers, and enabling more companies to invest in and own their own renewable infrastructure. So we're delighted to see those RE100 policies being put in place by the Korean government. But there's a long way to go, and we look forward to continuing to work with the Korean government and governments throughout the region to help enable access to clean, cheap renewables that will be the lifeblood of our future smart cities. If you'd like to find out more about RE100, please check out our website at re100.org, and I hope you enjoyed the rest of the day. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
네, 잘
Yes, thank you for that message. We are seeing Korean companies taking part in RE100 as well. As was mentioned by Mr. Sam Kimmins, we can see that there are major companies, leading companies driving RE100. Yes, you've mentioned them as leading companies.
포인트입니다.
And I think this is the most important point here. because you can make investments by looking into not the present value but future value, and they're trying to dominate that future value. Future value is something that would be necessary for them to invest to continue on with the leadership role. So I believe that this is an important point to keep in mind. You've mentioned about the future value, but to put this quite straightforward, at the end of the day, it means that they believe it will be profitable in the future. But it's a bit difficult to understand because it's about increased investments for the companies. But still, can we say that it can be profitable? Yes, Dr. Choi. You may think that it's just increased capex. However, with heightened interest regarding the environment, and as we see companies having to contribute to the environment, consumers now have the criteria when they do decide their purchases to make sure that they uphold their responsibility. So RE100 can actually have them promote their eco-friendly image as well as promote their products. For example, 70% of Americans support going renewable 100%. And the RE100 certification and products that are certified are RE100 certified are receiving the spotlight. So it may lead to a cost of production. However, it actually increases and enhances their image. It will, of course, turn into numbers, increased numbers in revenue. The global RE100 companies are also requiring their partners to source their energy with renewable means. For instance, we do see that the leaders are actually requiring their partners to be RE100 certified. Let me give you an example. Recently, there was a Korean company located in Indonesia that was supplying shoes to a major shoe company. And they were reviewing a project to replace their electricity generation to PV, because if they do want to supply their shoes to this major company, they have to switch to renewables to source their electricity. And in the case of coal-fired power plants, these overseas programs cannot be invested in even if it has high economic feasibility, because no bank in the world will extend loans to such programs. So it can be the case that the cost of electricity may be a bit higher for renewable energy right now, but considering carbon border tax, financing costs, and also the impact of the ESG image of that corporation, we can say that it has significant future value. So then, Dr. Choi Kyung-jin, what's your take on these comments by Mr. Kim? I do agree 100%. In the case of GS we are not directly a member of RE100. However, in terms of building new cities, we believe that it's important to increase the self-sufficiency rate of electricity by utilizing renewable energy. And when we do build apartment complexes, we have to actively source our energy with renewable energy to meet the regulations of the government. I can see that many companies are putting in a lot of efforts. So then, as was mentioned by Mr. Sam Kimmins, we do need the efforts on part of the government. Isn't that the correct, Professor? Yes. In Korea, considering Korea's industrial growth, the government played a key role. And particularly for new businesses and new industries, the government will have to play an even significant role because it has to do with regulations. In many cases, the regulation was a laggard to economic growth, and I believe that it's important to make sure that it will buoy the future developments. So Dr. Choi and Mr. Kim, because you work on the field, you probably know what's going on right now. So what do you think is most required? I believe that the government, expert group, and the private sector needs to come together to hold public hearings to enable a practical and a pragmatic RE100 system in place so that we can actually cater to RE100. And not only that, if we understand this as a global standard, when we do export our smart city platform, this can be quite beneficial. And not only that, if we can get RE100 certification at home, that would, of course, be quite beneficial as well. We would need validation from a certification institute in Korea, but if we can do that, if we can get our RE100 certified for our overseas programs, it will help us cut greenhouse gas emissions. I cannot agree more. Supply of renewable energy is increasing exponentially, but we do not have the market to trade such electricity right now. In order to achieve RE100, we need to make sure to create a market to trade such distributed power as well as the right institutional framework to support this. And I think that the government needs to put in more efforts to make sure that we do have such a framework in place. In the case of Korea, we cannot directly purchase renewable energy. There are some limitations toward the existing electricity market because we do have KEPCO. And so in the KRE100, we have KEPCO, we have power generation companies, and companies where one alternative can be utilizing the PPA. However, because KEPCO is dominating the overall electricity pricing, power generation companies and like Korea East West Power and GSENC find it difficult to engage in smooth negotiations. So there are some structural limitations. And to add, in order to disseminate KRE100, we need active participation of SMEs. However, for SMEs, there are many challenges on their side and it will increase their cost of production. Therefore, we need to provide some more incentives to actively induce the participation of SMEs to expand the foundation of KRE100. So this is something that the government should do. I believe that this session is quite key because we have one under MOLIT and one under MOTI. So you have two different overarching ministries that would guide your businesses. But if you look at the commitments that we made to reducing carbon emissions, we of course have to put in our efforts at home, but there are also many things that we have to do overseas. So in order to uphold our commitment, we need an integrated mindset. And I believe that emphasizing that would be quite key here. And if we want to make inroads into new businesses, it's quite different from the existing policies and regulations that are in place. So I believe that the insights gathered here today will need to be reflected in the industrial ecosystem amid this climate crisis, and smart city platforms and various platforms will help us solve these problems. And I think that Korea's institutional framework and the overall backbone systems need to support this endeavor. And in that aspect, all of your comments are quite significant and insightful. And I do want to ask a question at a technological angle. In order to create a carbon neutral smart city, what kind of technologies do you believe is most pivotal? Could you give us some information based on your experience, please? I believe that within the smart city, to be true to its name, we need smart sensors across the city to collect information. And we also need digital technology to make use of such data. And I believe that digital technology lies at the core of the smart city. And if you look at IoT technology, it's about swiftly collecting vast amounts of information. I also agree. And with regard to building a carbon neutral ecosystem, there is a research project that is underway. So I would like to give you an introduction on that. Yes, that would be great. So a carbon neutral ecosystem within the city. Can you give us some more information on that, please, Dr. Choi? A smart city zero energy program or project is something that we are currently conducting with MOTI. So it's about connecting the city to enable zero energy, which is a quite differentiating point. Even if you do have the right service and platform, if you do not have the right infrastructure, as was mentioned by Mr. Ki, it's very difficult to collect information and data. And in order to resolve this from the very beginning, we need the unit technology, infrastructure, as well as services all grafted together to create a smart zero energy city. So we're currently researching that possibility. And we do have a national smart city, the Busan Eco Delta City, that will be opening soon enough. And let me talk about the feed of this. It was 2018 where Busan Eco Delta City was selected as the national pilot smart city. And I'm sure you all know that we have Sejong 5-1 and Busan Eco Delta City. They were selected as the national pilot for the smart city. And in the feed, the front-end engineering design, what's most important here is to achieve 100% self-sufficiency based on renewables. So that's one. And second is to enable energy trading and also integrate heat and electricity and create an infrastructure to connect with future services. So this is also another important part of this, the basic design or the basic engineering. So this is on the infrastructure layer and the platform layer. It has to be organically connected, and it will look something like this on this slide when it's completed. And within the Eco Delta City, there's also a special zone consisting of 56 households or houses. We call this the Smart Village. And from prior certification, it will be satisfying renewable 100%, so it's all certified in terms of renewables. So platforms are being developed. So starting from the year end, we will have citizens living in this district to reduce energy use as well as reduce carbon emissions. So this will be a living lab that will be conducted for research sake. Yes, thank you. The zero energy technology. How will that be possible? I mean, we have piping, we have the buildings constructed, but if we can start from scratch from the very beginning when we build the buildings, I think that it will work. But we have existing cities. We have old cities, outdated cities across the country. So for such cities, can we actually tap this zero energy technology to these cities? And will it be well received by the existing citizens? That is an excellent question. Because as you can see, we live in the old city or the old city center, and it's very difficult to develop these areas. If we want to improve the living environment, it's very difficult to do because it's a completely different approach from new builds. So in the smart city industry, this is a major task at hand. And around the world, we're trying to muster our wisdom to find a solution to improving and developing these old centers. So I would like to ask a question to two of our speakers. What kind of solutions do you think will be significant in solving these issues? Yes, thank you very much for that question. Yes, I can see that. Yeah, your questions are quite keen. Yes, I've done a lot of study on this topic, so thank you very much for that compliment. So, at any rate, the smart city is like a department store for everyone because it consists of comprehensive solutions on all fronts. But as you've mentioned, in the new city, we start from scratch. So when we build the infrastructure and when we consider the future services and platform, we have that all embedded from the very beginning. So these solutions can be offered. However, for the old cities, there are some regional characteristics that have to be taken into consideration when we do introduce these energy or zero energy solutions. For instance, if it's a chemical plant, there are some waste energy that would be released. What's waste energy or waste heat? So through the chemical processes, there are waste heat that is being released in this industrial process. So we can actually use waste heat to create or generate electricity and also use this for heating purposes in other regions. So utilizing renewable energy and also tapping into unutilized energy sources will be something that we can do in these old city centers. So I believe that waste energy or waste heat can be another source of energy. So you've mentioned that we have a host of energy solutions or technologies that we can use. So depending on what kind of choices we make, maybe we may be seeing a completely different energy paradigm and also enable carbon neutrality. So with regard to that, maybe Professor Kim, is there anything that you would like to offer as the way forward? Yes, so up till now, we've been using fossil fuel. And What we're trying to do is find an alternative. There may be other clean energy sources and renewable energy sources. So first, we need to see what kind of options exist. According to BP's report, a global energy company, producing when we think of the energy sources, for the first time in 2019, renewable energy overtook nuclear energy. So, out of the next generation renewable energy sources, there is one energy source is receiving the spotlight as the most important source in the future, which is hydrogen. And as you know, hydrogen is a non-polluting energy source. So it's known to be the ideal clean energy source. However, because it has so high production costs, there were some economic feasibility issues leading to certain limitations when we wanted to expand out into this business. However, recently we're seeing a exponential growth in hydrogen energy. So I think that we really need to tune into this energy source. So I wanted to have a very important hydrogen company to present on their business. Yes, so then at that cue, we would like to introduce CEO Andrew Marsh of Plug Power for his video message.
Hello, I'm Andy Marsh, the CEO of Plug Power. Plug Power is located in upstate New York, a bit of a distance from Korea, but we have a close connection with Korea because of our investment from SK. So it's wonderful to be here today, and I'm going to talk to you about why smart cities need to be clean cities. And we believe very strongly that clean city should be based on hydrogen and fuel cells. For those who don't know, fuel cells are a device that takes hydrogen and creates electricity and water. And by the way, that hydrogen can be very green. That hydrogen can come from renewable electrical sources such as hydro, wind, or solar. So we are a real strong believer in clean cities using hydrogen and fuel cells. So some may ask, hey, is this technology real? And we've been doing it for a long time, over 25 years. And during COVID, we actually moved 25% of the food in the United States, doing it with customers like Amazon and Walmart. We've also deployed fuel cells, primarily for logistics applications, in places like Amazon, Walmart, BMW, over 40,000 of them. We've done 41 million fuel-ins, the most of anyone in the world, and we are the largest user of liquid hydrogen. So when it comes to fuel cells and hydrogen, we know a lot, and we've done also a lot. We're building the largest gigafactory in the world in Rochester, New York. That'll be able to produce 2.5 gigawatts of stacks. We're also going to be the largest producer of green hydrogen. Here in New York, we're building the largest green hydrogen plant in the world, 45 tons a day, which will be deployed by the end of next year. By the end of 2025, we'll have over 500 tons across the United States, equivalent to 1 million gallons of gasoline, and another 500 tons around the world. And in smart cities, we'll be able to provide green hydrogen for heating homes. We'll be able to provide green hydrogen to provide power to communities with our stationary products with microgrids, as well as the fact that we have a long experience in vehicles. We have a joint venture with Renault, the second largest commercial electric vehicle manufacturer in Europe, which leverages Plug's expertise in fuel cells with Renault's expertise in electric vehicles. They're really with a goal of having over 150,000 fuel cell electric vehicles on the road by 2030 via our joint venture called HYVIA. But when you think about mobility, why would you use hydrogen and fuel cells? It's actually quite simple. Hydrogen and fuel cells, if you're an owner of vehicles, and we believe the future smart cities, the owners of vehicles will be companies, not individuals. And those companies will want to maximize their return on investment. So when you start thinking about maximizing your return on investment, you want that vehicle on the road. And fuel cells versus elect batteries, fuel cells can be fueled 10 times faster. For example, a truck like this can be fueled in 10 minutes, just like a diesel truck, while a battery truck would take over an hour and a half. Additionally, when you think about asset utilization, you want it on the road. Fuel cells can be on the road twice as long as a battery electric vehicle because of the amount of energy that can be stored on board. And that energy is critical in commercial applications. In commercial applications, space is important. And Plug Power, based on work done by DHL, knows that after about 100 kilometers, the size of a fuel cell is about 1/10 the size of a battery as you increase the size of the engine. When you start thinking about that, DHL says you can carry a lot more packages on board than you could with battery electric vehicles. So in Plug's vision of the smart city of the future will be the vehicles, both for passenger and delivery, will be based on hydrogen and fuel cells. This power for the city, which we didn't go into great detail, will be powered by hydrogen via stationary products that will provide the electricity to home. And for many homes, you'll use that hydrogen to heat the home, replacing natural gas to provide cooking, heating, everything you need at a home. So we're really excited about the possibilities for hydrogen and fuel cells in smart cities. And I'd just like to highlight one more time, fuel cells and hydrogen is not a dream. It's here today. Thank you. Take.
네,
Yes, hydrogen energy. I thought that this was energy that can be used in the far future. But listening to the speaker speak, I think that this technology is already up and running. So, hydrogen energy, can this be applied to large scale power generation facilities? Yes, it is possible. Currently, Korea East West Power has Daesan Green Energy that it's involved in. And here, 500 megawatt capacity hydrogen-based fuel cell power plant is being operated. And also we're working with Hyundai Motors. As you know, there is the Nexo car. Yes, I've driven that. Yes, the Nexo automobile utilizes hydrogen fuel cell, and we're testing whether this can be applied to power plant electricity production. Yes, to my knowledge, Korea East West Power is involved in many hydrogen energy projects overseas. Is that correct? Yes, that is correct. And so we are actually involved in a hydrogen project in Australia, and I've prepared a presentation on this. Yes, please go ahead. Well, first of all, Korea East West Power is involved in a project for developing green hydrogen in Australia. What is green hydrogen? We have to talk about that first. It utilizes PV or wind power or other renewable sources, and we actually obtain hydrogen from these sources. So it's the most environment friendly type of hydrogen that you can obtain. You take well, in order to obtain this type of green hydrogen, we have selected a site that is about the size of 500 soccer fields in Australia, and we're building a PV power plant. So you said 500 soccer fields? Yes. So it's about half the size of Yeouido. Wow. And that's the first stage. In the second stage, we will additionally, in an adjacent site, develop a 80 megawatt PV plant, and also we will be establishing a long duration ESS facility so that we can provide electricity on a long-term basis. So we're trying to build that type of power system. And for this, we will be providing electricity for the production of green hydrogen and bring that hydrogen to Korea. In Korea, we will be securing this hydrogen and use it for hydrogen turbine usage. And Of course, there are some further testing to do, or there are some technological limitations to overcome, but we will be gradually invest in this and carry out this project. So, Brisbane, have you been here? It's nearby Brisbane, Queensland, right? Yes, that is a large site that you mentioned. Yes, that is correct. So, it's for the PV business, and this is a ultra level, very large, large capacity PV business. Yes, he just mentioned about the PV facility that is being built by Korea East West Power in Australia. And he mentioned about how PV and renewable energy sources are utilized for producing hydrogen. But I'm really curious. Now, Australia is about 10 hours away from Korea by flight. Why is it that you went all the way to Australia to produce green hydrogen? Well, first of all, if you look at the projections for hydrogen demand of Korea, we believe that starting from 2030, the supply of hydrogen with just domestically produced hydrogen will not be enough to meet the demand in Korea. And so we will have to import the hydrogen from overseas. The countries that have the lowest unit cost for hydrogen production is the Middle East and also Australia and Chile. And so according to Bloomberg data, the green hydrogen production unit price is $1.3 per kilogram in Australia, whereas in Korea it's twofold greater, $2.7 per kilogram. Of course, the government support and infrastructure establishment has to all be considered. But we did take that into consideration, decided to go with this project in Australia. Yes, that's very impressive, but I do have to ask you a question. Now, producing green hydrogen in Australia and bringing it to Korea will lead to logistics costs. What about the economic feasibility? Well, Australia has a lot of renewable energy resources, and as I said, the production unit price is one half of that of Korea. However, we do have to think about the 8,600-kilometer distance, so there will be the shipment fees. And so at this moment, the economic feasibility is not that high. However, to compensate this, we are thinking about utilizing ammonia for the shipment and also the vessels for delivering the hydrogen. So we're doing a lot of research and development in terms of improving the economic feasibility, and I do believe that the economic feasibility will improve in the future. Yes, thank you for the explanation. So I think that this project has high potential. Yes, but what about the cities that mainly consume electricity? Now, how much hydrogen energy is being used in the cities? Well, from the power producer perspective, already we are utilizing hydrogen fuel cells to provide electricity to cities. And also, but at this moment, large scale gas turbines are being used for power plants, and we're trying to look into ways to replace that with hydrogen turbines. And number two, well, the gas turbines, we are thinking of combining the LNG with hydrogen. Of course, going into the future, we will want to shift to 100% hydrogen based and smart cities and microgrids. Well, these can have hydrogen based turbines that can be applied in the future. So we're thinking about around 2020, and currently we're moving in that direction and focusing on R&D. Can I add to that? Yes. Well, GSENS has a brand known as Jai. Well, I think everyone's aware of that brand. Yes, it's an apartment brand. And I understand that fuel cells are increasingly being applied to the apartments under the brand name Jai. So I think that already apartments have these PV panels being established and attached. And for renewable energy resources for providing electricity to these apartments. Increasingly, fuel cells are being used, and I think that in the future, Korea East and West Power, if you provide these fuel cells at a low cost, then the usage will go up. And I think that at the apartment complexes, there can be some incentives, and if you provide incentives to the apartment complexes, then these will be more and more utilized. What do you think, Professor Kim? Yes, I think that hydrogen technology is something that we should increasingly focus on. I think that the energy sources are being diversified, but the thing is that the grid technology is very important here. So if you look at the grid technology, what do you think is the level right now? Well, I think that Korea's electricity grid, aside from Jeju Island, there is a single grid that is being used. In terms of the stability and the quality of the electrical power system, Korea's system is world class. And also in Jeju Island, there is a testbed being operated for smart grids. Also in the Jeollanam-do province, there is an island known as Gasa-do, and this is being developed as a self-sufficient energy island, and microgrids are being tested here. So I think that all of these technological efforts can help us commercialize environment-friendly microgrids at an early stage. Okay. I do agree with what Mr. Ki has said. I think that when it comes to the electricity supply, grid and network, the system that we have, the stability is world class. However, when it comes to PV, well, sometimes we cannot gain access, and this can hurt the stability of the grid. And so, I think the reason that hydrogen is so important is because it can be stored. In the case of PV, there is that instability of supply, but hydrogen can be stored, and this can actually compensate for that issue. And also, I think that we need a grid that integrates heat, power, and hydrogen in the future and further expand. Yes, the grid. You're talking about very closely knitted networks, right? Well, the grid. Well, grid, you know the shape of the grid, right? So you can think of the Korean chessboard. The microgrid, it started with that grid patterned shape, and so the distributed energy sources can be tied with the grid. Okay, so now I understand. So we're talking about the energy trading platform. Do you think that we need to further improve the way the platform is being run? Do you think that there should be improvements so that there can be greater transformation? Dr. Che? Well, right now, if you look at the energy trading platforms, most of them are focused on single energy sources or single energy types. But I think that going into the future, we will see greater distributed resources being utilized. So, for example, wind power, there is the infrequency of the resource supply. So I think that going into the future, we have to, or intermittent supply. So I think that going into the future, we have to think about integrated management of heat, power, and electricity and have that implemented and reflected into the trading system as well. So I think that we have to have a system that can trade different types of energies together. So for example, what types of energy can be traded? For example, you have the air conditioning in your home, and that is a representative case where electricity is switched to heat, or there are times where you can use the heat and transform it into electricity, and sometimes you can actually use the waste heat and use it for electricity. So I think that we can actually combine these together and have integrated trading. Can you add on, Dr. Gi? Well, I think that currently we are heavily focused on centralized energy supply, but I think that going into the future, we will see more and more microgrids playing an important role. And I understand that universities, new towns, and industrial complexes are testing the microgrids. Based on our experience, well, there are different projects such as the one in the UK where the renewable energy is used for microgrids in a fish farm. So we reviewed the economic feasibility of this project. But in Korea, the electricity charges are actually relatively low, and in such countries, the commercialization of microgrids might be not that economically feasible. And so I think that there has to be nationwide incentives provided, or RE100 has to be further promoted to have increased implementation of microgrids. Okay, so I think that the businesses should be at the forefront of such changes. Of course, the businesses, you're planning ahead, but I'm curious about what your long-term vision is in consideration of these changes. Why don't we first hear from Mr. Key? Well, the government has a 2050 carbon neutral plan, and so our company has come up with a TF to come up with a roadmap in light of the government plan. And also, until 2030, we are planning to develop and operate 3 gigawatts worth of renewable energy. And also, we want to commercialize large-scale hydrogen gas turbines at an early stage. Of course, then that would mean that our coal-based power plants will be reduced. Yes, the case of GS, ENC, of course, I do not represent the entire business of our company, but now, we want to overcome the limitations of growth of the Korean construction market, and so we want to transform into a sustainable global company. So we're trying to diversify our business portfolio. And so we're looking into many different business types, such as renewable energy businesses and the secondary cell business, or the smart home business, and the development digital platform. We have the JAI AI that we have developed. So we are entering into these new businesses and making investments, and we're working with Kakao as well. Also, we already have our EPC capacity, so we want to utilize our EPC capacity and also our new business fields so that we can become a developer that is involved from the beginning to the end of a project and thus enter into the smart city market. So smart cities in the past mainly were about telecoms or SIs, for example, Cisco or the large corporations in the field of telecom or SI participate in the smart city projects. But I think that with the SIs and the telecoms at the center of smart cities, data utilization might be the strength of Korean smart cities. But as you know, we have capacity and experience in energy and resource infrastructure. So I think that with us jumping into the smart city market, we can actually help in building the infrastructure platforms and providing services. Yes, so we've heard about you talk about carbon neutrality. And up till now, I thought that going carbon neutral was about saving or protecting the environment. And it seemed to be a vague concept, but I think that the businesses are actually involved in very detailed activities to make this possible. Now, Professor Kim, can you add on and summarize? Well, I am participating as a moderator, but I've learned a lot myself, especially the power company and the construction and developer, the construction company, the developer joining together, and also Korea's most leading broadcaster is here, and I was able to learn from each and every one of you. But I do have a question that I want to ask you before we wrap up. Now, what do you think smart cities can do for carbon neutrality? What is the one core element that smart cities should do or provide? Well, first of all, I think that it's the optimal operation technology that kind of technology is needed in smart cities. If we can have accurate projections of renewable energies based on big data and AI, then we will be able to also be able to have integrated trading of energy, which will improve efficiency and help us become one step closer to carbon neutrality. So you're saying that what's most important at smart cities would be optimized operation technology. Yes. Dr. Key? Well, I think that governance is very important, but this is not just an agenda for the government. I think that the government, businesses, citizens, and all entities and actors within our society have to work together. And so, under the same goal, we have to make concerted efforts, and that is what is most needed. Professor Kim, although you asked the question, I want to ask you the same question to you. Well, smart city and carbon neutrality, I think, is all about integration. So I think that we have to think about how we can go together and we have to plan. And I think that these new technologies for the cities can be integrated together and applied to help us meet our goal. And in that process, I think what is most important is the consensus of the people and the participation of the people. Yes, I think that no longer do we only emphasize profit making. I think that the citizens' role and engagement is very important. So this was a very important topic that we have touched upon. This was the first session of the World Smart City Expo Tech Conference. We talked about the innovation and transformation of smart cities in the era of carbon neutrality, and we were able to learn a lot. Can you tell us your impression of the session, Mr. Key? Yes. Well, today we talked about smart cities for carbon neutrality, and we were joined from people from the different sectors of our society. And so we were able to talk about the different aspects of carbon neutrality. And I think that this was a very valuable opportunity for all of us. Now, they say that the environment crisis clock is pointing at 9:56. So we really have to work on carbon neutrality. And I think that if we plan well for the smart cities, then we will indeed meet the goal of carbon neutrality established by the country, and perhaps meet this goal before the target period of 2050. Okay, Dr. Che. Yes. Well, I think I was able to learn a lot from the views shared today. Well, nowadays we hear about the refugee issue in Afghanistan. I think that rather than the refugees generated or the refugees of the wars or conflicts, the refugees because of climate change are a more serious issue, and we are seeing more and more of such climate change refugees increasing in number. And I think that the climate change refugees can only be dealt with when everyone plays a role. It's not just a single country or a single entity that can solve this issue. Yes. Well, Dokdo, the water nearby Dokdo is cold temperature, but now I hear that the water temperature is going up. And this is caused by climate change. That's what I heard. So I think that we really have to understand the seriousness of climate change and really respond quickly. So, Dr. Kim, what kind of preparations or efforts should we make to tackle the issue of climate change? Yes, I think that we heard some very significant points. I am the chairman of the Committee for Smart Cities, and as the chairman, I want to tell you that carbon neutrality is not an issue that we can easily resolve. I think that there will be some inconveniences that the citizens will have to endure. But what is most important is that despite that, we really have to work on carbon neutrality for our future generation and our children. What I want to emphasize here is that in the past industrial revolution, we were not able to really play a role. And so, despite our intentions, we had no choice but to adopt fossil fuels for our society's industrialization. And we tried to really catch up with advanced countries. But today, Korea has become a leading country when it comes to the fourth industrial revolution. Although we were not able to play a vital role in the previous industrial revolution, I think that now our position is quite different. We are now taking the initiative in the fourth ID. And so when it comes to carbon neutrality, I think that Korea is leading the way in discussing the relevant matters. And smart cities can be an important model for future cities. And we can utilize the smart city models to deal with the challenges of the future. And today we were able to touch upon some very relevant, important issues in detail. In the past century, we were a fast follower. We were behind advanced countries and we tried to catch up. But now we are leading the way in the future, and we are leading the way in developing the models for the future based on the smart city development and also in the process of achieving the goal of carbon neutrality. I think that Korea is indeed serving as a leading country, and we're working with advanced countries for co-prosperity and co-growth. So having said that, at the Smart Tech Conference and the World Smart City Expo, we are discussing very detailed issues related to our future. And we are sharing the knowledge and wisdom of many experts, including those from abroad. And I do hope that these types of dialogues will continue in the future so that Korea will continue to serve as a country that contributes to the advancement of humanity and civilization. I was very impressed and touched by the role that Korea can play. And I do hope that what we have discussed can become a reality. And for that, we need the concerted efforts of the experts here today. And also, I think that when it comes to the role of the government has to support the businesses in pioneering new businesses and attempts. And also, I think that the government has to support the endeavors to making our ideas a reality. And with that, I would like to conclude my summary of this conference, and it was an honor to serve as a moderator of this session. Yes, thank you very much. So the issue of going carbon neutral, well, this seems to be a pressing issue. And I do believe that we are re-establishing new rules. Will the smart cities be the one to follow the rules or the ones to establish the rules would be the most important question now. So in the next session, we will be able to listen to the hints to finding the answer to this question. And in the next session, we will have a Smart City Data Live. Many hot companies, including AWS, will be joining us. We will reconvene at 12:30. Thank you very much, three gentlemen, and I hope that you will join us, everyone, in our second session. Thank you.